And as you have seen in your syllabus, for this week, we have two topics. One is on the respiratory system about lung function. And I posted the slides already. And the second is for today, and we are going to go over the kidneys. Right. The kidneys, or what we call the main organ in the urinary system, has three main functions. And the first one is the excretion of nitrogenous wastes. And for mammals, the major nitrogenous waste is the urine. And for other organisms, it could be urea or uric acid. And the second function is the maintenance of water salt balance of the blood. We're going to go in detail on this one. And the third or the last function of the kidney is the acid-base balance. And this one is what we call pH. To perform its function, the kidney, or the main organ in the urinary system, has to work with the digestive system and the respiratory system, as well as the cardiovascular system, because these systems are closely related. And after all, every cell has to form a tissue, and tissues has to form organs, and organs has to work together to form the organ system. And when you say the whole organism, these whole systems has to work close to each other. So for the digestive system, for example, food gets in and then it will go to the small intestine. It will be there will be absorption. So the nutrients will get into the liver. So from the digestive system, food is getting into the cardiovascular system. So some of the food might, for example, for protein, it will be converted into amino acids. And as you know, amino acids have amino group. And this amino group is the one that is going to end up in urine because it has amine, which is the main component of the urine. With the respiratory system, especially as you can see carbon dioxide over here, carbon dioxide is an important element for the bicarbonate buffer system that the kidney closely works with. So all these systems are closely working to each other. Urine is conducted from the kidney by the ureter to the urinary bladder and then out to the urethra. Pay attention to the sequences here. First, urine comes from the kidney, and then it goes to the ureter, and then it goes to the urinary bladder, and at last to the urethra. For the male mammal, especially for human beings, the urethra also carries the sperm during ejaculation, because the urethra serves as an opening for the reproductive system as well as the urinary system. But in females, these two systems are separate. There is a separate opening for each of them. For amphibians, birds, and reptiles, actually they have a common chamber, which is called the cloaca. So the three organ systems, the digestive system, the urinary system, and the genital tract, these all end up in the cloaca. So be it like a feces or urine or any kind of semen, it's going to end up in the cloaca. It's just a common chamber. This is the human urinary system. As I told you, just remember the sequences: kidney, the two ureters, and then the urinary bladder, and at last the urethra. I think you have been tested on this one, especially the human kidney. Kidney has three major parts: renal cortex, renal medulla, renal pelvis. The cortex is the outer layer. This is similar to the brain. The cerebral cortex is in the outside like that. Renal cortex is the outer layer. And then renal medulla, it contains the renal pyramids. For some of you who on the practical, instead of renal medulla, some of you mentioned it as renal pyramids. And I gave you a partial credit for that because renal medulla mainly it contains the renal pyramids. And the third one is renal pelvis. This one is the innermost hollow region where urine collects before draining into the ureter. Yes, this is renal pelvis. And microscopically, each kidney is composed of 1 million over a million tiny nephrons that actually produce the urine. We're going to take a look at the macroscopic view of the kidney later in the slides. But know that the functional units of the kidney, we call them the nephrons. So this is a model of cross-section of the kidney. As you can see, there are two nephrons here, one on the right side and one on the left side. And the portion is, it looks like the map of Africa. You know, Africa, the top part is wider and the narrower part is like the descending and the ascending limb. So the renal cortex is, imagine there is equator in the middle. So the larger part is the cortex and the narrower part is the renal medulla. So this is like sub-Saharan Africa, or this is like North Africa, if you know the map of Africa. When you go over here, we have the pyramids. We're going to take a look at it later. These are the renal pyramids, and these are structures that look like fiber. We are going to see them in detail later too. And we have the renal artery, the red one, and the renal vein, the blue one. It's like when something is when there's a shortage of blood, your skin gets blue. So you know something is vein because when blue is like when you are short of oxygen or blood in general. Nephrons. Nephrons, as I told you, are the functional units of the kidney, and the first structure we need to know about the nephrons is the nephron capsule. Usually it comes up with a different name. Sometimes they call it renal capsule, and other times they call it Bowman's capsule, but they are all the same: nephron capsule, renal capsule, Bowman's capsule, and even glomerular capsule over here. So like they always give them a different name. This is where blood is filtered because here's the blood coming in, and then some of the nutrients, waste, salts, water might get in here, and then the rest of the blood goes back to the bloodstream. So blood comes in and then leaves out. The one coming in, we call it afferent arteriole, and the one leaving, we call it efferent arteriole. So nephron capsule, with all its different names, is the place where blood is filtered. The inner layer is composed of cells, allowing easy passage of the molecules. These cells are actually the glomeruli right here. They are the network of capillaries that are found within this renal capsule. And then once the filtrate goes through this renal capsule, it will go to the proximal tubule, or we call them proximal convoluted tubule. And these tubules, they do have numerous mitochondria. And you know, whenever you have numerous mitochondria, it means there is a lot of active transport going on. And at the same time, there is microvilli. What's going to happen here is, as you know, microvilli are, for example, very prevalent in small intestine because the absorption of food takes place in the microvilli. Like that, the presence of this microvilli is telling you that there is some absorption going on. And usually it is the absorption of important nutrients back to the bloodstream that goes on in this proximal tubule. And then we have the nephron loop. This nephron loop, sometimes it's called the loop of Henle. And we have the descending limb, and then we have the ascending limb, the one that goes down and the one that goes up. As we were talking about the golden color so far, this golden tube, that's proximal, the one going down is the descending limb, and this one is the ascending limb. still the golden color. And then the distal tubule is this one, still the U-shaped, the golden color, up to until it meets the collecting duct. Collecting duct connects several nephrons. For example, we have one nephron here. When you saw a nephron, it is this whole structure from the glomeruli, the capsule, the proximal, the descending, the ascending, and the distal. This whole thing is one nephron, and the other is second one. So right here, there is also another distal tubule coming in. So if the whole picture was complete, we probably had like 4 nephrons, 1, 2, 3, and then probably 4. But this picture contains only 2. So the collecting duct delivers urine to renal pyramid. Renal pyramid is this one. So the collecting duct is going to bring it to the renal pyramid. All right, so from here, from this picture, as you can see, the descending and the ascending limb goes down to the renal medulla, but the proximal and the distal convoluted tubule are in the renal cortex. So this section is actually going to dip into the medulla and then it goes back up. Each nephron has its own blood supply, and exchange occurs between nephron and blood to form urine. As you can see, there are blood vessels in like purple color, and the gold color are the tubules in general. So there will always be exchange of blood with the nephron. So there's blood and there's the nephron, there will always be exchange. So this is a detailed picture. So we have the glomeruli capsule or Bowman's capsule. We have the Bowman space in here, like the space in between. We have the proximal tubule, proximal convoluted tubule, and then it goes down. This is called the one going down the descending loop, or this is the loop of the nephron. It's going to go back up. And then we have the distal convoluted tubule, and then we have the collecting duct. Urine formation. So urine formation happens in steps. So it has 3 steps, filtration first, and then reabsorption of the solute second, and then the last one is secretion. For filtration, blood pressure forces small molecules from the blood capillary into a capsule, creates the filtrate. This is actually right here. So we have filtration, the green line, as you can see, green filtration. So blood pressure, because this is renal artery, not exactly renal artery because it has to, the renal artery is going to divide into arterioles. So this is actually afferent arteriole. So blood comes in, it gets into the glomeruli, and then some of the filtrate is going to get in here. So passes the glomerular capsule and gets into the proximal convoluted tube. So filtration is when some nutrients, salt, water, wastes get into this tubule. That process is called filtration. Blood pressure forces molecules from blood capillary into capsule. So water, nutrients, salts, urea, they are going to get in there. But if you are going to lose your water and nutrients, that's not good for the body. So these important molecules has to be reabsorbed. And that's what reabsorption of solids means. Substances move back into the blood, which is out of the filtrate. It is a very selective process because you might not need to reabsorb urea, but at least you need to reabsorb really important nutrients and obviously water. At this stage, and as you have said earlier, reabsorption takes place here, and there is a lot of mitochondria in these tubules, the proximal convoluted tubule. And mitochondria means there is some kind of process that needs energy, and especially water and some important nutrients are reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. So reabsorption takes place at the proximal convoluted tubule primarily. So there is a lot of active transport going on, and water follows as salt is reabsorbed. Secretion, and this is the last step in the urine formation. When you do secretion, we are moving substances into the distal convoluted tubule, especially from the blood. Substances that are not really important to the body or that are harmful to the body, like urea, are actively secreted into the distal convoluted tubule. So moving substance into filtrate, especially uric acid, which is like urine, but this is more common in different organisms, not in mammals, obviously. And then we have hydrogen ions. Hydrogen ions means this is the one that determines the acidity of a certain environment. And then ammonia, and then penicillin, obviously, when you take antibiotics. So this stage helps us to get rid of harmful substances. Okay, so filtration at the Bowman's capsule or at the glomeruli, reabsorption at the proximal tubule, and secretion at the distal convoluted tubule. At the descending, H2O is actively, it is going to diffuse into the medulla because, as I told you, this is like Africa. This top part is wider, like North Africa, and this bottom is Sub-Saharan Africa, is narrower. So this is the medulla, and there is a high concentration of solids in the medulla, so water is actually diffused, which is going to be a passive process. It's going to diffuse into the medulla. During the ascending limb, this one is not permeable to water, so salts are actually being secreted, actively secreted into the medulla. And as you can hear from collecting duct 2, water is going to go out because there is a high concentration of solids in the medulla. Yeah. Now, as we have said earlier, kidney has 3 functions. One is related to urine formation. Second one is water and salt balance. And water-salt balance is closely associated with pH balance. So typically animals have means of regulating the osmolarity or the concentration of the internal environment so that the water-salt balance stays within normal limits, because our body always need to maintain homeostasis, internal balance. In mammals, long nephrons can create a hypertonic urine. Our body is always in the lookout for a shortage of water. So even if we drink a lot of water, our body still tries to maintain the amount of water as normal as possible. The ascending limb pumps out salt and urea into renal medulla. The ascending limb, it pumps out salts and urea into the medulla. That means when you are going to have more concentration of solids here, that means water is going to leave the collecting duct to the medulla. Water follows by osmosis out of collecting duct. Here is one shortcut. Water always follows where salt goes, unless the membrane we're talking about is selectively permeable, either to water or salt. So wherever salt goes, water follows, unless it is like selective, unless it selects for water or salt. And water salt balance is regulated by 3 hormones: the antidiuretic hormone, the atrial natriuretic peptide. Atrial is related to atrium, which is one part of the heart, one chamber. And then natriuretic is it's something that induces urination. And then peptide is obviously peptide. So antidiuretic hormone, atrial natriuretic peptide, and aldosterone, they closely work with each other to regulate salt-water balance. and coffee can sometimes reverse the effect of ADH. So when you are trying to maintain water cell balance, and at the same time, if you are drinking coffee, that's gonna affect this whole process. I have a picture of the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system because this is really important in salt-to-water balance. And the process starts when renin is secreted because there is a decrease in blood pressure. So when there is a decrease in blood pressure, means when in the kidney, renal means kidney, perfusion means related to blood pressure. So when there's a decrease in blood pressure, or especially in the kidney, when the juxtaglomerular apparatus, that is the organ that senses the amount of blood pressure in the kidney, when there is a decrease, renin is actually secreted. So the secretion of renin is going to activate the conversion of this molecule, or I think it's like a protein called angiotensinogen, to be converted into angiotensin 1. One thing to know is this is inactive, like any zymogen. See the name Induswigen. So like any zymogen, it is inactive and it is always there in the liver. So when renin is secreted because of this decrease in blood pressure, uh, angiotensinogen is converted into angiotensin 1, and then there is this enzyme called angiotensin converting enzyme, and that converts number 1 into number 2, angiotensin 1 to angiotensin number 2. This is actually secreted by the renal, it's secreted around in the lungs, and at the same time, renal endothelium means the inner part of the kidney. So the conversion is going to activate 5 different processes. They are not entirely independent, they are somehow interdependent to each other. So the first one is sympathetic activity. This is related to the fight and flight response, especially when you are in a situation when you need to run away or when you are in an accident. So your body wants to raise your blood pressure, and that's going to happen through angiotensin 2. So some sympathetic activity is going to increase. That means your fight or flight response is going to be increasing, or it's going to be at maximum. Second is tubular sodium ion or chloride ion reabsorption and potassium ion expression. One thing is sodium ion and potassium ion are similar in their chemical property. So if you have more of one ion, then you try to have less of the other. They always tend to operate in antagonistic ways. If you have more sodium within a cell, that means you try to reduce it because you might have less potassium ions inside the cell. If you have more sodium on the outside, you try to keep more sodium in the inside instead of in the outside. You don't find them in the same place at the same amount. They always go in opposite direction. So you try to reabsorb sodium and chlorine because you wanted to increase blood pressure. And when you have more solids, you tend to increase the blood pressure. And at the same time, you need to retain water because blood has a lot of plasma, and a fair component of that plasma is water. So if you wanted to increase blood pressure, you need to retain water. And then angiotensin also acts on the adrenal gland. This is one of the hormones we're talking about. Right here, aldosterone, ADH, ANP, and aldosterone. So aldosterone is produced by the adrenal cortex, and the secretion of aldosterone is going to supplement the process we already saw, the tubular sodium chloride. Tubular, in a sense, it's related to the tubules, proximal and distal convoluted tubules. So aldosterone is going to activate more H2O retention and then reabsorption of primarily the table salt or the sodium and chloride. And the fourth one is arteriolar vasoconstriction. Arteriolar means it is related to the arteriole or the smallest kind of artery. And the arteries are going to constrict, they are going to get narrower because you wanted to increase the blood pressure. If you wanted to decrease blood pressure, you need to dilate it. But in this case, you have to constrict it so that the blood pressure increases. And the last one is the pituitary gland, especially the posterior pituitary gland, which produces the antidiuretic hormone. Antidiuretic is, anti means against, so it is against urination. Diuretic is something that induces urination. So it induces H2 absorption. So we're not gonna let water leave our body. So this is the whole process how salt water balance is regulated by the kidney, and not just by the kidney, the whole organs. As you see, there's accessory organ from the digestive system, there is the respiratory system, and somehow blood is also involved because blood vessels are here. So this is not just one system playing a role, it is 3-4 different organ systems working together to a common goal, that is water and salt balance. So water and salt retention will be maintained, and then the amount of blood that's circulating in our body will increase. That means we will have a higher blood pressure, and the perfusion or the blood pressure that the juxtaglomerular apparatus recording is going to increase. Okay. This has a more detailed picture. Whatever is not written over here, you might find it in detail over here. Then the last but not least function of the kidney is regulation of blood pH. Most mammals can regulate the pH of blood, and for that they usually use the bicarbonate buffer system. And sometimes they also use their breathing rate, because breathing determines the amount of carbon dioxide in our body, and carbon dioxide is the main component of the bicarbonate buffer system. We'll see it in a minute. Only the kidneys can secrete a wide variety of acidic and basic substances. This is true because kidneys sometimes can produce protons, and as you know, proton by itself is acidic. And it can also produce basic substances like ammonia. Kidneys are slower acting, but more powerful than the buffer breathing mechanism. Yes, if you wanted to, let's say, regulate the pH of blood, you might start breathing harder or try to breathe slower. You could do that, but that is not going to help you in the long run. So whatever the kidney does is more powerful. To simplify, kidneys reabsorb bicarbonate ions and excrete hydrogen ions as needed. If the blood is acidic, hydrogen ions are excreted and bicarbonate ions are reabsorbed. We're going to see this one in a minute too. If the blood is basic, hydrogen ions are not excreted and bicarbonate ions are not reabsorbed. Okay, so we have carbon dioxide in water, and these are going to form carbonic acid, and then this might dissociate into a proton and a bicarbonate ion. So what the kidney does is, when the concentration of this hydrogen ion is a lot, that means the blood is acidic, or the kidney is going to be more acidic. So since the blood cannot accept that because the pH of blood is around 7.4, so you don't want to be acidic. What the kidney does is it gets rid of these protons. So it's going to get rid of it through urine, but it is going to retain this one because it's not the bicarbonate ion that's making the blood acidic, it is the protons. So get rid of this one and then retains this one. But when the blood is basic, it does the opposite. It keeps this one because we need this one. This is acidic. If it is basic, the only way to reverse it is to maintain this one. But the kidney get rid of this one, this opposite process. Otherwise, this hydrogen and carbonic ion, the bicarbonate ion are going to react, and it might reverse the whole reaction, which the body doesn't need. So when the blood is acidic, proton ions are get rid of, the kidney get rid, it removes them, and it maintains this one. If it is basic, it maintains this one and it removes the second one. That's what it says. If blood is acidic, then avoid the hydrogen ions, remove them, excrete them. If the blood is basic, keep them. Hydrogen ions are not excreted, but you can remove the bicarbonate ion. Carbon dioxide enters the blood during internal exchange because tissue fluid has a higher concentration of carbon dioxide than blood. Okay. So the concentration of oxygen in the lungs is higher than the concentration of carbon dioxide. But in the tissues, since all the oxygen is used up, it is the concentration of carbon dioxide that's far greater than that of the oxygen. So when it's like that process actually is the one that affects the hemoglobin transport. So most carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate ion. You don't find regular carbon dioxide in our body. Usually carbon dioxide is found in the lungs. But for the rest of the body, either it's found in the form of bicarbonate ion or probably carbonic acid, but not just regular carbon dioxide. H plus causes pH to lower, but much of H plus is absorbed by the goblin portion of hemoglobin. And HCO3 is carried in plasma, not the regular carbon dioxide. And as blood enters the lungs, the equation is reversed and carbon dioxide diffuses out of the blood and into the alveoli. Yes. So in the lungs, this whole reaction is reversed and carbon dioxide is formed, and this carbon dioxide is released into the outside. So the bicarbonate is not the only buffer we have in our body. There is also the another kind of buffer. We have a buffer that involves ammonia and a buffer that involves phosphate. For ammonia, ammonia can form, it can pick up a proton and can form the ammonium ion. And phosphate also has, especially phosphoric acid, it has 3 protons, and those protons actually can involve in in the buffering of hydrogen ions in urine. So it's not just the bicarbonate that the body uses. Okay, so this is the capillary, this is the kidney tubule. Sometimes the ammonia can pick up hydrogen ion and this ammonia can be formed. And carbonic acid, we also find it in the capillary and the kidney tubule. We get used to the term kidneys because most of the time like the biology studies deals with mammals, but insects have their own kidneys, but for them, we don't call them kidneys, we call them Malpighian tubules. So Malpighian tubules are the equivalent of our kidneys. Yeah, these are the kidneys. Yep, as you can see, they always try to balance various kinds of resources in our body, especially the wastes, ions that are not needed, the waste is water. Insects use Malpighian tubules attached to gut, and uric acid diffuses into tubules from hemolymph Okay. Uric acid is what we call, it is like urine. So read it like this. Urine diffuses into the kidney from blood. Uric acid is like urine for insects. We produce urine, they produce uric acid, and then diffuses into tubules, the Malpighian tubules in particular. And then from hemolymph. Hemolymph is the equivalent of blood in insects. Water follows salt gradient. We said that already. Usually water follows wherever salt goes, unless there is selective permeability that's specific to either water or salt. And water and other useful substances are reabsorbed by rectum. And uric acid leaves the body by at anus. For us, it lives through the urethra, but for the insects, it lives through the anus. Problems with kidney function. One of the first signs of nephron damage is the presence of albumin, which is one of the biggest proteins. So when there is a protein or when there is white or red blood cells in the urine, usually it is a sign of some kind of dysfunction in part of the kidney. If damage is so extensive that more than 2/3 of the nephrons are inoperable, urea and other waste substances accumulate in the body. Yes, because the main function of the nephrons is to get rid of nitrogenous wastes. So if it's not functional, that means these wastes are going to accumulate. But it is not the accumulation of these things that's going to damage our system. It is the retention of water and salts that's life-threatening because, as I have said earlier, one of the main function of the kidney is a salt-water balance. So if it is not balanced, it's not just the nitrogenous wastes that's going to kill us. The water and the salts could also kill us because anything above a normal level is not healthy for our body. Kidney transplants. A person only needs one functional kidney, and there is always a possibility of rejection, like all transplants. There's also hemodialysis. Hemo is blood. Dialysis is when you try to purify blood through artificial means. So patient's blood is passed through a membranous tube in contact with the dialysis solution, and it's called the dialysate. And substances that are more concentrated in the blood diffuse into the dialysate and vice versa. And we're going to see a picture in a minute, so it will be more clear. The dialysate used to remove harmful substances from blood and beneficial substances. Right. This is what we're talking about. So let's say blood has a high concentration of nitrogenous wastes. So when the blood is attached to semi-permeable membrane, so those wastes, if there is a high concentration over here than over here in comparison, those wastes are going to get into, so blood is flowing and they're going to get in here. And let's say this one is a fresh dialysate. Fresh means, dialysate means you have all the important resources, nutrients you need over here. So if the concentration of these nutrients is higher over here than this one, those nutrients are going to get in here and they're going to end up in the blood. And from here, from these nitrogenous wastes, there is another semi-permeable tube over here. So those nitrogenous wastes are going to pass through here and they're going to end up in a different dialysate, which contains those components that contain nitrogen or that are harmful to our body. Now, I think you have been tested on this one. So that was just part of the whole fetal pig structure. But since we are talking about kidney, I just wanted to bring it again because it helps whatever we did in the earlier slides. So this is the ureter, and as you can see, it's attached to the pelvis. This is, by the way, it's taken by our professors at Baruch. So, okay, so this is ureter and this is renal pelvis, and the outside part, this whole thing is the cortex, renal cortex. And this sheet, the middle is renal medulla, and the ones you see are the pyramids. Yep, and this is renal pelvis. Uh, this one, I was checking some videos on YouTube, and I paused one of the videos and I got this picture because I tried to zoom in and it looks nicer. So this is the functional unit which contains most of the components of the nephron. So the structure you see here is in the middle, the darker parts are the glomeruli. These are the capillaries, the network of capillaries that engage in the filtration process, or you can say they are the main filtration organs. So these are the glomeruli. And this wide boundary you see is actually, it has a space in between. That space is called Bowman's space, or sometimes called urinary space. And the cover, the outer layer, we call that the Bowman's capsule. So Bowman's capsule and the space, Bowman's space, and then these are the glomeruli, the ones that filter blood. So let's say some afferent arteriole come in and then it's gonna leave. So the one that comes in is afferent arteriole, the one that leaves is gonna be efferent. It is difficult to identify the arterioles here, but we know which ones are the proximal and which ones are the distal convoluted tubules. The structures you see, the ones that stain red, this whole sheet that looks like letter, I don't know, U. This is actually the proximal convoluted tubule. It's not just that, this one to this whole structure, the ones that are stained in red, or over here. This is proximal. And the white in the middle, like for example, this one, or this whole structure, or from here to here, or this one. This one is the distal convoluted tubule. It stains lighter. The ones that stain darker are the proximal. The ones that stain lighter are the distal convoluted tube. So 5 structures here: glomeruli, Bowman's capsule, Bowman's space, proximal convoluted tubule, and distal convoluted tubule. This one, I have a video that I have attached at the end of this slide. So this one is actually, I took a close-up of one of the pictures. So as you can see, there are structures that feeds into this wide structure. So these are actually the capillary ducts that contain urine, and they are going to feed into the calyx. This white sheet is called the calyx, and this calyx could be the minor calyx and could lead to the major calyx. No, actually, this calyx actually is just one, and it has calyces. So we are going to have many of them, and they are going to form the relatively larger minor calyx, and then the bigger one is called the major calyx. So these are capillary ducts, and they feed into the calyx. Okay, we're going to see it in detail. This is just this structure, the same thing we see here. Enlarged is this one. These are capillary beds, and when you go further, they're going to look like this one. This one is going to look like this one. So this one is the lumen of the capillary duct, and it's going to lead into the calyx. And these are cells you see, darker stained. These are columnar cells, and there's the basal membrane. Okay. Okay. this is a 3-minute long video and shows you the microscopic view of whatever I did here. It has more details. Yep, that's all for the kidneys. That's all I have. Yep, if you have any questions, just send me an email. Thank you.